We tend to overlook what's closest to us: the quiet objects, the daily rhythms, the unnoticed spaces we pass through without thought. But photography has a way of slowing the world down, of asking us to look again, not for beauty in the conventional sense, but for meaning. Because meaning isn't always loud. It doesn't always arrive with grandeur or spectacle. Sometimes it's a shadow stretched across a floor, or the way a room holds the memory of someone who's just left. When I first started, I thought I needed something extraordinary to create something worthwhile. And to be honest, even now, that feeling still creeps in. The sense that what's right in front of me isn't enough. I need a rare light to find a perfect subject, to visit a place I've never been. But with time, I learned something else, something quieter but more enduring. The most powerful images aren't always found. They're felt, and they're often waiting right where we are. What if the most powerful photo you ever take isn't out there in the world, but right here in your everyday life? Not because the subject is extraordinary, but because your way of seeing it has changed. This video is about learning to see differently. It's about using light, composition, and intention to uncover the quiet narratives hiding in plain sight. Because once you start seeing the mundane for what it really is, you realize it was never mundane at all. It's easy to overlook the everyday, to pass it by without a second glance. But often, it's these quiet, familiar moments that stay with us the longest. We're often taught to look outward for inspiration, to search for perfect backdrops, dramatic light, subjects that feel important on the surface. But the truth is, what moves us most deeply rarely announces itself. Everyday life holds a kind of intimacy that spectacle can't replicate. It's in the quiet rhythm of putting on your shoes before heading out the door, the subtle shift in a room when the hum of conversation fades and stillness takes over. These aren't just moments. They're memory, emotion, and story, all unfolding quietly. What gives the mundane its weight isn't what it looks like, it's what it means. And meaning often comes from things that are familiar. A grand scene might catch our eye, but it's the ordinary, seen with care, that holds our attention. In storytelling, especially through photography, this shift is everything. Because once we understand that emotion doesn't require scale, we free ourselves from the pressure to chase what's impressive, and instead, we begin to reveal what's real. Before you can tell a story with a photograph, you have to learn how to recognize it within the frame, how to feel it forming before you ever press the shutter. And that kind of scene isn't accidental. It's deliberate, it's chosen, and it begins with light. Light doesn't just illuminate a scene, it defines the emotional atmosphere. An image taken in warm light can make it feel hopeful, nostalgic, or inviting. That same image lit by a cooler light can feel distant or sterile. It's not the object that changes, it's the mood shaped by the light around it. Look beyond whether something is well lit and start asking, what feeling does this light naturally hold? What story could it tell if I framed it carefully? Next is composition. How you frame something tells your viewer what to feel, not just what to see. A centered subject might feel formal or stable. Off-center can feel unbalanced or intimate. Negative space can create isolation. A tight crop can pull us in emotionally. Now, these aren't rules, they're tools, quiet tools, tools that whisper story. But composition is more than placement, it's language. Leading lines create rhythm, direction, sometimes tension. Layering, foreground, middle ground, background, can say something about presence and distance, inclusion and exclusion. A clean frame invites stillness. A cluttered one might speak of life in motion. Walk the room, shift your angle, lower your eyeline. The smallest adjustment can completely change what the photograph is saying. And behind it all, intention. The most important shift isn't in your camera, it's in your eye. Intention isn't about getting the shot, it's about listening to the scene. Instead of asking, what can I photograph here? Ask, what is this space already feeling? And how can I shape that into a story? Maybe you're in your living room, there's nothing happening, but there's light sliding across the floor. A forgotten object on a table, a stillness that feels heavy or safe or something in between. That's where the story is, just beneath the surface, waiting to be framed. When you begin to ask those questions before you press the shutter, you stop documenting and you start storytelling. Once you begin to see with intention, once you slow down enough to notice how light falls, how a room holds its quiet, how an ordinary object carries more than its shape, you start to realize that meaning isn't something you chase, it's something you uncover. Most of what we photograph isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic gesture, no cinematic backdrop, just life, sitting in plain sight, waiting for you to notice. But when you approach these moments with care, when you allow yourself to feel what the scene is offering, you begin to understand how creative techniques become story. In this section, I want to show you 3 ways that the ordinary begins to reveal itself. Symbolism always begins with observation, not interpretation. I move through my home and notice something that exists exactly as it is, a pair of shoes resting by the couch. Nothing curated, nothing posed, nothing arranged, just a small detail of everyday life. That's where this kind of symbolism thrives, a real object in a real place, tied naturally to the rhythm of that space. Once I've seen everything clearly, I ask the question that brings symbolism to life. What does this moment feel like? And for me, that feeling isn't nostalgia or melancholy. It isn't loneliness or memory. It's something much simpler and more grounded. Home. The shoes aren't symbolic because of their appearance, but because they sit in the exact space where my life unfolds. They represent presence, my presence, the imprint of a lived-in environment. With the emotion clarified, I begin shaping the photograph with intention. I don't move in close to isolate the shoes. I step back so they remain part of the room, a detail rather than a centerpiece. I lower the camera and reach for a normal lens, something like a 35 or a 50, because I want the space to feel honest and familiar, reflecting the way I actually experience it. The composition stays understated, the shoes low in the frame, enough of the surrounding environment included to let the viewer sense the room without overwhelming them with information. Light becomes the final element of truth. Instead of shaping it dramatically or waiting for a cinematic moment, I use the light that's already present in the space. Whether it's soft, ambient light, uneven spill from another room, or the natural fall-off you only get in lived-in homes, I let the light remain honest. The point is not to make the moment extraordinary. The point is to reveal the meaning that already exists inside the ordinary. Symbolism works here because the photograph becomes a quiet vessel for emotion. It shows something literal, a pair of shoes, but encourages the viewer to feel something more, the presence of a person, the rhythm of a home, the subtle imprint of a life. None of that is forced. None of it is constructed. It emerges because the scene is observed with care and expressed with intention. When I photograph these shoes, I'm not trying to dramatize them or elevate them beyond what they are. I'm trying to let the viewer feel what I feel, the quiet sense of home, of being rooted in a space that reflects a real life. Symbolism lives in that moment, in the shift from what the object is to what it quietly represents. And once you learn to see your surroundings with that level of attention, the mundane begins to carry meaning everywhere you look. Everyday spaces are full of layers. We just don't usually stop long enough to notice them. Imagine the soft quiet of morning. A coffee mug sits near the edge of the table. A chair sits behind it, angled slightly off to the side. Kitchen in the backdrop. None of this is dramatic. None of it demands attention. But when you look with intention, the scene reveals three distinct planes of life: the intimate closeness of the mug, the familiar presence of the table and chair, and the quiet stillness of the kitchen. This is where layering thrives, in these quiet stacks of experience. Once I see the layers, I ask the same essential question I always ask: what does this moment feel like? In this case, the emotion is contemplation, the kind that sits quietly in the morning before the day begins, the kind you feel in spaces you've lived in long enough to know by heart. The mug isn't meaningful on its own, nor is the kitchen or the chair, but taken together, the layers create a sense of interior stillness meeting exterior movement. That emotional tone becomes the anchor for every choice I make afterwards. When I bring the camera into the scene, I position myself far enough back to let the layers unfold naturally. If I move too close to the mug, the image collapses. It becomes about a single object instead of the relationship between objects. But if I stand at a comfortable distance and let the foreground gently guide the viewer's eye into the midground and beyond, the image breathes. I might place the camera slightly above table level so the table, chair, and background align without distortion. Lens choice becomes a subtle but important tool here. I reach for something in the mid-wide range, usually a 35, because it allows the space to feel open and connected without exaggerating the perspective. The depth of field stays shallow enough to separate the layers, but deep enough to let each plane participate in the moment. Light becomes the connective tissue between the layers, shaping depth without calling attention to itself. Layering works when the image allows the eye to wander, to move from one plane to another and feel the quiet story that exists between them. When I photograph that morning scene, I'm not documenting objects. I'm revealing how they relate, how they coexist, how they create atmosphere. Layering is a way of capturing the fullness of a moment, the closeness of what's near, the steadiness of what's familiar, and the subtle world outside that keeps moving whether you notice it or not. In that relationship, the ordinary begins to feel almost cinematic, not because the scene is dramatic, but because you're seeing all of it all at once with intention. Imagine a dim kitchen in the early evening. Almost everything is in shadow, except for the soft glow cast by the stove light above a kettle. Nothing's happening. The room is still. But the longer you watch, the more you begin to feel the tension building, the anticipation of heat, the subtle rattle inside the metal, the suggestion that something is about to change. This is where the decisive moment begins. Not when the action occurs, but when you sense it approaching. That emotional tone, anticipation, is what shapes every choice that follows. It's not dramatic, it's not cinematic in the traditional sense. It's a quiet kind of tension, the kind embedded in everyday routines. The kettle itself is ordinary, the light above it is ordinary, but the moment before the whistle, before the steam lifts into the glow, carries a kind of presence that feels almost suspended in time. Your job is not to chase that moment, it's to recognize when it's forming. The decisive moment is an expression of presence, not speed. It's about recognizing when a quiet moment is on the verge of becoming meaningful and allowing it to unfold without forcing it. When I photograph that kettle under the stove light, I'm not just documenting steam. I'm revealing the emotional texture of a familiar ritual, the pause before movement, the suggestion of someone just out of frame, the way ordinary routines contain their own cinematic tension if you're willing to wait for them. The decisive moment isn't about catching something spectacular. It's about sensing the shift from stillness to expression and being there, calm, observant, intentional when it finally arrives. We've explored how symbolism, layering, and the decisive moment can turn the everyday into something cinematic. But what happens when you feel like there's nothing around you worth shooting? When your home, your neighborhood, your routine feels too familiar to notice anymore? This is why numerous people never start, because they believe the story has to come from somewhere else, but it doesn't. The biggest obstacle to everyday storytelling isn't lack of gear, time, or skill. It's the belief that nothing around you is worth capturing, that your life is too dull, too repetitive, too ordinary to hold beauty. But that's where real photography begins, with the refusal to look away from your own life. If you can learn to find meaning here, where you live, where you work, where you rest, then you'll carry that ability with you everywhere. Here's how to push through when everything feels too familiar. Strategy 1 is to change the question. Instead of asking, "What should I shoot?" ask, "What emotion am I feeling right now?" Then look around and search for something in your space that mirrors it. Frustration might show up in tangled bed sheets. Stillness might live in the steam of your morning coffee. You're not hunting for subjects, you're translating emotions. Strategy 2. Use constraints as catalysts. Creativity thrives under pressure, so give yourself rules. 1 room, 1 hour, 1 focal length. These limitations strip away excess and force you to notice what's often ignored. Constraints don't limit vision, they clarify it. Strategy 3. Make the ordinary strange. Sometimes we stop seeing things because we think we already know them. To break that cycle, change your angle, literally. Shoot from the floor, stand on a chair, get in close, defamiliarize the familiar. When you interrupt your habits, your eyes wake up. Strategy 4. Revisit and reframe. Return to the same spot at different times of day. That corner you ignore at noon might come alive with shadow and mood at dusk. Don't be afraid to rework the same scene multiple times. Repetition isn't failure, it's refinement. Strategy 5. Create a ritual. If inspiration won't strike, build a habit that makes space for it. Set a time each day to photograph something, anything. Don't wait to feel creative. Ritual creates rhythm, and rhythm invites flow. You're not just practicing photography, you're practicing attentiveness. Creative blocks are rarely about the world, they're about our mindset. By shifting the way you see, limiting your choices, and showing up consistently, you'll start to notice what always was there. Beauty isn't rare, it's just rarely noticed. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the right place, the perfect subject, the next adventure. But photography doesn't begin out there. It begins right here, in the quiet of your own kitchen, the way light falls across the floor, the stillness of a chair that was just sat in. You don't need more gear. You don't need to travel halfway across the world. You need a shift in how you see, because when you start to notice the ordinary, you start to realize the extraordinary was never missing. It was just overlooked. If this video helped you to see the world a little differently, I'd love for you to like the video. And if you're focused on growing as a photographer, learning not just the how, but the why, subscribe. And if you want to support this kind of work, slow, thoughtful, and made to last, you can buy me a coffee. The link's in the description. Every bit helps keep this channel going. And remember, what you're looking for might already be in the room.